All right, back with another tier ranking list. Interesting stuff. Let's just jump into it. I don't have to set these up. You know how they work. Cincinnati Bengals right off the bat. I put them in plucky but bad last week, and I feel good about putting them there. I didn't drop them all the way to just bad. There still is some talent on this roster, and I just thought Jake Browning looked all right as a, looked like a backup quarterback, but he looked like a solid backup quarterback. I still thought, though, that obviously the difference between Burrow and Browning is huge. I think I had him in Super Bowl contenders before that injury, so that's definitely a tough one. The Giants, I had been putting them in just bad for a while. I can't do that anymore. They're plucky. They've been winning some games. They barely beat the Patriots, so I'm not exactly sure how confident I feel. But Tommy DeVito weirdly has been playing well these past couple of weeks, so give them credit. Then the Niners, they're obvious Super Bowl contenders. They continue to, they dominated the Seahawks, continue to dominate teams. I think that kind of feels obvious. They should be there. The Saints are, I'm going to be honest, I think they're mid. They're mid. They're totally mid. I mean, in fact, I don't even feel that bad about it. Yeah, mid feels correct for the New Orleans Saints. They are a team that, they just been so disappointing. And I think that part of it is maybe some name brand recognition is a little bit better than talent right now, like with Derek Carr. He hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't been Derek Carr. He hasn't been what they paid him for. I like Chris Olave a lot, and their coverage has been good, but now they have injuries there. So, tough loss against Atlanta, who kind of, does, I think, match up pretty well against them, but still, mid feels right for the Saints. The Chicago Bears, I'll put them in plucky but bad. Again, with Fields there, Fields makes this offense incredibly watchable, if nothing else. I still think there's a lot of issues, but plucky but bad feels right. The Packers, I believe I put them in the bad tier in the past, but, Jordan Love has, I feel like, really turned his game around. I'm going to put them all the way up to maybe playoffs at this point. Their defensive coaching staff hasn't been that bad these past couple of weeks. Something to keep a lookout for. Again, Love's kind of history has been inconsistency, so I am kind of not jumping to wow he's great, jumping to wow the Packers are great, but they're playing great right now, so you got to give them credit for all that stuff. Arizona Cardinals, I thought Kyler kind of would put them into plucky tier. So far, it hasn't really happened. Not a lot Kyler can do. Not a lot of talent around him, but still. Just bad feels right. The Baltimore Ravens, best record in the AFC. You got to put them in the Super Bowl contender tier. They're a team that, I thought they played much better than the Chargers did, despite the fact that that game was weirdly close at the end there, which, again, that is an issue about the Ravens, is they seemingly play down to their competition sometimes, but at the same time, they're still a really good team, and that's not going to matter in the playoffs, right? You're only going to have good competition once you get there, so definitely a team that could win the Super Bowl. The Cowboys, I put them in Super Bowl contender. I feel like I got to keep putting them there. I mean, I made that video where I talked about how typically if you finish top 7 in passing, in receiving, which includes tight end play, and in coverage, like, you usually go to the Super Bowl or lose to a team that goes to the Super Bowl that also had all three of those factors. The Cowboys have all three of those factors. Now, schedule has been a cakewalk. There's no denying that. They haven't played a ton of great teams, but that turns around. These next 5 weeks or so, they're playing a lot of great teams. If they look worse, I will drop them down, but if they can, look solid in that situation, like, definitely they're a team to, that's their ceiling, is Super Bowl contender. It wouldn't be fair, I feel like, to put them lower than that, given how they've played this season, even though the schedule is the schedule. The Bills, I'm going to put in maybe playoffs. They're such a frustrating team. Their schedule is so tough that I don't know if they're going to get into the playoffs, just because they're going to have to beat some great teams. Massive blown opportunity against Philadelphia, a game that they really nearly had. Eagles are a great team. You can't hold it against them too much. But it really feels like they're kind of wasting a great year from Josh Allen, in my opinion. I know Allen's getting the criticism because, that's how the media works, is when a quarterback loses, everyone blames the quarterback. But his turnover-worthy play percentage is actually really good this year, Josh Allen's is. He's been unlucky with turnovers, and I think that he was great in that Eagles game. Again, had the one turnover. That's not good, but other than that was fantastic and was the reason they nearly won. But there's too many other issues on this team. I can't put them above maybe playoffs. Chargers, man, I still think they're mid. I really do. I know that they've been, losing so many games, losing so many close games, and there's definitely issues. I still think Herbert's good enough, and, there is other talent on offense, and their defense has had its moments. I think it's fair to put them in the mid category. I still think their defense sucks. Brandon Staley's got to go, all that stuff. But there's enough there. I'm not going to put them as a bad team, even though their record isn't good. The Denver Broncos, I got to put them in maybe playoffs, right? I mean, they're the hottest team in football. They have currently the longest win streak going in the NFL with 5 straight games. Obviously, they started off very slow. Defense took some time to figure it out, but now I don't want to say back to last year's defense, but it's starting to play actively good football. Like, it hasn't turned from bad to okay. It's turned from bad to good. Weirdly, the offense has cooled off the past couple weeks, but it's still good enough that I could see them in the playoffs for sure. The Lions are going to be the first team of the day to be put into for sure playoffs. However, tier kind of feels like this tier is made for the Lions a little bit. They're definitely going to be in the postseason, and they are definitely a postseason caliber team. The Jared Goff turnovers, that's starting to get, that's creeped up. You don't want to say anything, but that's a little concerning if you're a Lions fan. But the real concern is the defense just hasn't been as good as it was at the start of the year. And they need to figure out, ways to fix that quickly. Because, again, if you're going to have to play a team like San Francisco in the playoffs, if you're going to have to play, even a Dallas in the playoffs, you're going to have to find ways to, to at least limit them in certain areas. The Chiefs, Super Bowl contenders, obviously, they're a win away from being tied for the 1 seed. I still think they get the 1 seed probably. Their schedule isn't that difficult. It's they're 8-3. The Ravens are 9-3 currently. But if the Chiefs win out, they can get the 1 seed, and I think that probably happens. Or at least as in they get the 1 seed. I don't know if they win out, but I will say they have looked human, right? For sure. The offense hasn't been as smooth. They went down 14-0 against the Raiders. So, it hasn't been as smooth as maybe you would like to see if you're a Chiefs fan, but you still got to put them in Super Bowl contender tier. The Falcons are another team I consider mid. They have a very distinct way that they can win, which is run the ball effectively and then run plays off of it. Desmond Ridder is really good, with the exception of every game he'll have 2 or 3 just boneheaded mistakes. He's been pretty good outside of that, but those are huge mistakes that have cost the Falcons games in the past and have nearly cost the Falcons games. Although did enough here. The Falcons offense did enough, and their defense did more than enough to win them the game. They're an interesting team. I still think they're just mid though. The Eagles are another Super Bowl contender team. Again, reigning NFC champs, who are 10-1, best record in football, and have a 2-game lead. They do play Dallas. Feels like Dallas is probably the one team that could potentially, Dallas and San Francisco, actually. They play them the next 2 weeks of the season. So there is potential for another team to take the 1 seed. There is. But if Philadelphia can survive these next 2 weeks, they're golden, and they're going to be the 1 seed. The Cleveland Browns, I think they're plucky but bad at this point. And I've been low on the Browns all year. I just think that, listen, with this quarterback situation, it's just tough. Their quarterback situation was bad with Deshaun Watson. He wasn't playing great. He had that one solid game, his last game of the season. It still was, as a whole, as a package deal this season, bad. But it's been atrocious without him. And I think that for Cleveland, maybe a wake-up call this offseason, spend a little bit of money to get a good backup quarterback might not be a terrible strategy. The Texans, I still think, are a maybe playoff caliber team. Their offense has looked very good, with obviously CJ Stroud and those many weapons. They were a foot away from tying this game at the end there. There still are some issues with this Texans roster, but not a lot, to be honest. I think their defense is still pretty good. They're a pretty complete team. You could talk me into for sure playoffs, however, and in fact, you know what? You did. Good work talking me into it. Yeah, for sure playoffs. Why not? Why not put them? They're fighting for a playoff spot, but again, I kind of view these tiers less as predictions and more as how I view the caliber of team you are. They feel like a playoff team, so I'll put them in that tier. Next up, we have the Indianapolis Colts, who I've probably been too low on in the past. I owe them an apology for sure. I thought they looked really good last week, and it's kind of one of those things where it's they're beating my team, and as they're doing that, because I'm a Tampa Bay fan, if you're new to the channel, and as I'm watching that, I'm kind of like, why was I so low on the Colts? Their defense has played well. They do have some weapons, and I think the biggest thing as well is Jonathan Taylor looked back. And if Jonathan Taylor is that Jonathan Taylor, yeah, they're absolutely a potential playoff team. I think there's a real chance they get in, for sure. The Rams, man, this is a tough team to put in a tier, right? Because at their best, they've been like honestly, at their best, you could argue like they've been like a Super Bowl contender caliber team. I don't think even at their best they've been that, but at their best, they've been like a for sure playoff team this season. They've just been so inconsistent. At their worst, they've been a just bad team. I think I'm going to put them in maybe playoffs. I am. I don't know. I'm feeling optimistic today. Last week, I put everyone into mid tier. Now I guess I'm putting everyone into maybe playoffs tier. Big win against Arizona. I do think it's possible, they can make the playoffs. I see them as a bubble team right now. I did my ESPN playoff machine thing, and I had them tied for the 7th seed, although not getting it with a tiebreaker. So it's possible. They could certainly make it in. The Dolphins are definitely, do I put them in Super Bowl contender or do I put them in for sure playoffs? However, I could go either way on this one. I really could. I think I'm going to put them in for sure playoffs. However, I think that, I don't know. It's weird because I'm still struggling with it. Maybe I should put them in Super Bowl contender because let me just talk through it and then I'll decide at the end of it, because my frustration is it feels like they should be better. And I want to say, when they lost to the Chiefs, I was like, hey, that was kind of a great loss. They were clearly the better team in that game, made too many mistakes, but I still see mistakes. Even against the Jets, Tua had the 2 turnovers. Like, you can't be making those mistakes against a team like Kansas City in a conference championship game and win the Super Bowl. Do I think they could cut down on those mistakes? I do. So I don't know. It's weird where I could go either way. You know what? Maybe it's the holiday season. I'm in a giving mood, I suppose. Let me be optimistic here with them as well. I'll bump them up, but they're on the bubble. Another bad game next week. You're getting dropped down, so don't waste it, Dolphins. The Vikings. I think the Vikings are mid. I know that they're fun. I know that it's exciting. Their defense has looked a lot better with Flores. I still just don't know how much I trust this Josh Dobbs thing. I don't. I know he's fun. It's very exciting, very cool to watch, cool story, all of that. But that's just how I view Minnesota right now. Patriots, yeah, if there was a worse tier than just bad, they'd be in that. The Jets, if there was a worse tier than the worst tier that the Patriots are in, they might be in that one. And the Panthers, if there was a tier even below that, they might be in that one. 3 really bad teams. Really a disaster with all 3 of those teams. I don't know. What's the best thing about those teams? Honestly, I guess for Bryce Young, you can at least look around and say, hey, it does get worse than me. I'm not the worst in the league. I guess you have that going for you, although record is the worst in the league. So definitely, tough stuff there for those 3 teams. The Pittsburgh Steelers, offense looked much better. I know the point totals weren't spectacular, but the offense looked much better. Yardage totals were way up. It was just one of those weird, didn't have the points. At the end of the day, you got to put points on the scoreboard. I get it, but moving in the right direction offensively. I still don't know how much I trust this roster. So I still think I'm keeping them as a mid team because I'm not going to let one good offensive day completely color how I view this team. I'm not. And it was a good offensive day where they still scored 16 points against a team that didn't have their starting quarterback. I know Burrow doesn't play defense, but obviously that still affects helps the Steelers' offense when your opposing team doesn't have their starting quarterback and getting better field position, probably getting more drives, things like that. That being said, there's definitely potential for the Steelers to bump it up. So they've been kind of in the mid and the maybe playoffs tier all season, kind of gone back and forth, but that's where I view them now. The Seahawks are, as of right now, a maybe playoff team. I mean, they got crushed by the Niners. Their schedule is brutal. I mean, they have another 3 really, they're playing Super Bowl contenders each of the next 3 weeks, so that's tough. It just is. But they're still a really good team. There's still a lot of stuff to like about them. So I do see them potentially getting into the playoffs. They just haven't been living up to their potential this season. And because of that, I have them down a tier than maybe I would have if they were living up to their potential in the for sure playoffs. However, the Buccaneers are, Right now, you can almost argue they're plucky but bad, and I think that's where I would have it. I mean, their defense hasn't played well. Like, their defense is not a good defense, and I think that decision has worked out, right? For paying a quarterback $4 million, getting that kind of play from a quarterback like that, that's completely worked out. But there still is he's not Mahomes, right? Like he's not a good enough quarterback to will you to victories. Like, you need other talent around him. Mike Evans is great. Chris Godwin is great. They never throw it to them though, so only so much those guys can do. The running game finally worked, but guess what? It's still a bad strategy to build a team around the run, even if you have an effective running game, unless you have Derrick Henry or Christian McCaffrey. That's not, or your Shanahan scheme. For the Niners, they have two of those things. Typically, it's not going to work out very well. So yeah, they're plucky. They can win certain games, but they're not a good football team. The Raiders are on this list. I kind of view them as the same way. The Aiden O'Connell thing was fun, but it hasn't been quite as great these past few weeks. Still is some talent. Jacoby Myers had a really good week, and obviously Max Crosby, all that. But I don't know how much I'm buying into them. Next up, we have the Tennessee Titans, who Will Levis has had his moments this season. Derrick Henry has certainly had his moments, although I would argue he isn't as dominant as we've seen in previous years. Hopkins has been pretty good for them, and their defense has been incredibly up and down this season. So, to me, plucky but bad feels right for the Titans. Washington, I think I got to drop them to just bad at this point. I mean, Sam Howell's interesting. I don't think it's all his fault, but again, you could certainly use an upgrade there. There are talented receivers on this roster for sure. I think the offensive line is better than people give it credit for. I don't think it's great, but I think Sam Howell kind of does make it look worse by holding on to the ball for 1,000 years, right? I think that's an issue. And then the defense is, right now, maybe the worst in football. I mean, is that a crazy take? In fact, I mean, I guess you could argue Arizona, but I wouldn't. I think, if you have Mahomes playing the Washington football team, you're like, that's 50 points easily. That's just how you view that team. They still somehow made it competitive against Dallas, but it was not a competitive game. Dallas was the better team through and through, and then in the fourth quarter, things got off the rails. So, Jacksonville. Now, Jaguars fans might want to say, hey, we had the same record as the Dolphins. We had the same record as, a lot of these teams. I think every division leader in the AFC has, 3 losses. I'm still putting them in the for sure playoffs, however, tier. And Jaguars fans are going to be mad, and justifiably so. The Jaguars' ceiling has been Super Bowl contender. I do feel like you still have to take those bad games into account for them. And, the receiving core has looked great these past 2 weeks. And if it's going to stay that way for the rest of the season, they are a Super Bowl contender. If it's not going to stay that way, they're not. It's really that simple to me. And over the course of the season, it hasn't been that. Yes, Ridley has been awesome these past 2 weeks. Is that he's just finally part of the offense, or did he just happen to have a good couple of weeks, and is he going to fade back into the background? I don't know. So because of that, I have a little bit of concerns. Again, that Houston-Jacksonville game, that felt like a coin flip game, right? So those two teams being in the same tier feels okay to me. This is not a bad tier to be in. It's just, again, I think the other teams you could argue could be in this tier would be Dallas and Miami. To me, the 4 teams that have to be in the Super Bowl contenders, in my opinion, are the Eagles, Chiefs, Ravens, and 49ers. So that's how I view that. What do you think? And I would say if there was a tier in between Super Bowl contenders and for sure playoffs, however, it would be Jacksonville, Dallas, and Miami probably in that tier. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.